Let's review the life cycle of an ascomycete real quick again because we got cut off on the previous part. So we're starting here on 1 with a hypha that produces conidiophores. A 4 is the stem part. It's this one part right there. And then the conidia are released from the conidiophore. So the stem part right here, and these conidia are being released, these spores right there. They can germinate, produce hyphae, and they could continue vegetatively on this cycle right here, or they could switch over, and then these vegetative hyphae, they could actually produce plus and minus cells in plasmogamy, and they could then fuse together, karyogamy, and then do meiosis first, then mitosis, sexual reproduction. That's typical for that. And then the ascus eventually opens and releases ascospores. That's these guys right here. And then they germinate into hyphae. And then we could either stay in the sexual reproduction cycle or move over to asexual. Now let's move on to Basidiomycota. That will be the last category of the medically relevant fungi. These guys are club fungi with septate hyphae produced asexually via conidiospores here, and produced sexually with basidiospores, therefore their name. Formed externally, these basidiospores, they will be formed externally on a base pedestal called a basidium. Let's take a look at their life cycle. So the life cycle of a basidiomycete. Asexual reproduction, let's start right here, the hyphae. They fragment and grow into new mycelium, and they could go with just growing more mycelium. So that will be just the typical asexual reproduction, just keep going producing hyphae. Or they could switch over here, plasmogamy, producing plus and minus cells as before. They fuse together, and then they produce this fruiting body of what we would normally call a mushroom. That's your typical mushroom right there, this fruiting body that then produces the basidiospores. They're formed by meiosis. There are these little gametes right here by meiosis, and the basidiospores, they mature, and then the basidiospores, they're discharged. They can germinate, settle down somewhere else, germinate, and start a new mycelium going in this direction, or producing another fruiting body here in the sexual reproduction cycle. Let's take a look at the terms that we're using when somebody has a fungal disease. In general, a fungal infection is called a mycosis. If the fungal infection is throughout the entire body or deep within the body, we call it systemic mycosis. If it's just under the skin, then it will be subcutaneous mycosis. And if it affects the hair, skin, or the nails, then it's a cutaneous mycosis on the skin. Superficial mycosis, they are localized. Here the examples given, the hair shafts. Opportunistic mycoses, those are fungi that are usually harmless, but they can be pathogenic in a immunocompromised host that doesn't have the defenses. So normally they wouldn't cause disease, but in people that are immunocompromised, they can. So here are some characteristics of pathogenic fungi. And so let me point out, among the zygomycota, we don't really have a whole lot of human pathogens, and there really is nothing. You'll hear about the rhizopus. We do have that in the lab, or we would have had it in the lab. Microsporidia, there's also not too much here in terms of the human pathogens. Not much that you would have to know anyway. But here on the ascomycota, there's quite a few that you will hear about, again, also in the lab part that goes along with this lecture. So the aspergillus, there are some highly carcinogenic type of fungi molds that can grow. Then we have the microsporum right here. This one is important. Trichophyton, I think we may have that one in pathogen group number 5. And then definitely in pathogen group number 5, we have Coccidioides immitis. This one is important. And then, of course, Candida albicans. That one is important. Diaper rash, thrush, those kind of things. You'll see that in the pathogen group. And then also Pneumocystis carinii, that one is also part of the pathogen group. Then we have Epidermophyton, this one also important. So there's in the group of the Ascomycota, there are quite a few here. And finishing up here with the Basidiomycota, human pathogens. This one we do have it in a pathogen group. This Cryptococcus neoformans. This one you'll hear more about in pathogen group number 5. And then among the fruiting mushrooms, the Amanita species, the one you may have heard about them. They are basically hallucinogenic, LSD type of hallucinogens inside of them. So here they're listing them as toxin ingestion. Well, so there's hallucinogens in some of these mushrooms. Now, on the positive side, let's take a look at some good things that fungi do for us. Saccharomyces cerevisiae. This one, very popular. This yeast you can use to make bread, wine, also hepatitis B vaccine, all good things. Trichoderma species, there we can gain some cellulase, an enzyme from that. Taxomyces produces a medication known as Taxol, that's cancer medication. And then entomophagia, biocontrol in general. This one here is cool too. Conidaria minitans kills fungi on crops. So this one outcompetes other fungi. And Pestilomyces kills termites. That maybe somebody should think about that as termite control strategy. Moving on to lichen. Lichen, that is a symbiosis of a fungus and a green alga. So a fungus is a heterotroph. It cannot photosynthesize, but it can grow in pretty harsh environments. So here's the deal. Fungus says to alga, hey, you can photosynthesize, so you can make food as long as you have some light. I'll provide a place for you to live, a holdfast, and you give me the food that you produce by photosynthesis. So they cut a deal, and that's a lichen. Lichen, they can grow in pretty harsh environments and higher altitudes, pretty cold environments too, where there's not much food, because the alga can produce food by photosynthesis, and then the fungus provides just a means for the alga to have a place to stay and to do the photosynthesis. So let's take a look at what they look like. There's a thallus, a body of a lichen made of this medulla, and then rhizines, this holdfast that holds on to, let's say, a rocky surface, and a cortex, a protective coating over the algal layer. Here's what lichen looks like. You have definitely different shades of green, and again, this is a symbiosis, a deal between an algae cell that can photosynthesize and a fungus. Here a diagram that makes it a little bit more clear what a lichen looks like. So you have the thallus here. This is this fungal structure, the hyphae, of course, and then here you have the green cells, the algae cells that can photosynthesize. So they're sort of embedded here with the fungal hyphae, where the fungal hyphae provides sort of the space, the place for the algae to take hold and do their photosynthesis. And while they're doing this here, the fungus sort of with its hyphae just creates a place for, or hold fast for, the algae then to stay there too. Again, in a lichen, the alga part of the lichen produces the carbohydrates by photosynthesis. The fungus provides the holdfast. So they have a pretty good deal here going on together. Economic importance. Some of these lichen, they can produce dyes. Some have antimicrobial substances. The litmus, that's a pH reagent that we sometimes use in a lab. And also, lichen can be food for herbivores. Moving on to our next group of eukaryotes, will be the algae. Well, they're unicellular or filamentous. They're photoautotrophs, so that means they can photosynthesize and feeding themselves. Troph to feed, auto self, photo by light. So they do photosynthesis. They don't have any roots, stems, or leaves, although the photosynthesis parts, of course, makes them plant-like. So they're in the group of the Protista, just that they are the more plant-like ones because they can photosynthesize. Yet they are single cell, typically don't have any roots, stems, or any other distinguished tissues, basically. And most of them are aquatic, so that means they need water for their growth and reproduction. Here, this table, you can take a look at it. There's not much information from this table that you would need to know. So you can just take a look at a few of these, the diatoms. Some of them can produce toxins, and that can be causing problems. So there are some of these here produce toxins. Some water molds, they're parasitic. We'll pick the ones up that are relevant and more specifically. But from this table here, you really don't need to worry about it too much. Characteristics of algae. So locations dependent on nutrient availability, wavelengths of light, and surfaces to attach. So the wavelengths of light and whatever type of chlorophyll they have or pigment substance that helps them to do the photosynthesis, that's the wavelength of light that they want the most. They do need surfaces to attach, and so that's what makes the lichen such a good combination, because the fungus provides the surface to attach to, and the algae then is sort of embedded into that surface that's provided by the fungus. The thallus, so would be the body of multicellular algae. They consist of a holdfast, stipes, and blades, that kind of stuff. So that's what you see on these larger algae that you see when you go down to the coastline. You can see that sometimes. So here will be different algae in their habitats, depending on the type of photopigment that they have. They will be needing different wavelengths of light, and so that allows them to grow closer to the surface or maybe deeper down, depending on how much the photons can penetrate the surface. So right here on the surface you have more the red wavelengths absorbed, and then down here more the blue, and so there you find the red algae much deeper. So it all depends on the photopigment that the algae has and how deep these different electromagnetic waves can penetrate through the surface. The characteristics of algae, they all reproduce asexually. You do have multicellular algae that can fragment or reproduce sexually via alternations of generations. Not that important for you guys here. So here will be an example of green algae, and really there's not much you need to know. This little chlamydomonas right here form some gametes that are fusing together, fertilization, then zygote formation, meiosis, and then here we have more of these little gametes that are popping out right here. In asexual reproduction, they just keep doing mitosis and grow, mitosis again, so that would be asexual reproduction cycle. Here are some important algae to know. Brown algae, also referred to as kelp a lot of times, they contain cellulose, typical plant material that you find in the plant cell walls. They also have alginic acid in their cell walls embedded, so that's interesting. The multicellular kelp is quite large and macroscopic, of course, because of their size. Algin, which is used as a thickener in foods, kind of as like a gelatin type of substitute. And here would be algae, brown alga, macrocyst. There you can see sort of the blade, the stipe, and the pneumatocyst. Moving on to red algae, they have branched thalli. Most of them are multicellular. They're harvested for agar, which is our thickening substance that we use in the lab, and carrageenan. Some of them produce a lethal toxin, but mostly what we like them for would be the agar and the carrageenan. And here next up, this is a nice picture here of red algae, their habitat. So